This is a story called The Big Concrete Lorry. We love big diggers and lorries and things like that at Buttercup, so I thought you might enjoy this one. The Pattersons lived at number 26 Trotter Street. There was Mum, Dad, Josie, Harvey and little Pete. And also Murdoch, their dog. The house had a patch of garden at the back with flower bed and a washing line and an apple tree. In the front there was only just room between the house and the street for some flower pots and a couple of dustbins. Josie had a room of her own. It was jam-packed with her things. Harvey and little Pete shared the back bedroom. It was jam-packed with their things. Murdoch had a basket in the kitchen, but often, though he wasn't supposed to, he slept at the bottom of Harvey's bed. Murdoch was a roly-poly dog who fitted nicely under Harvey's feet, like a plump hot water bottle. The Pattersons' hall was full of coats and boots and skateboards and buggies. The living room was full of lots of Pattersons. Sometimes when Josie was doing her homework at one end of the table, Mum was cutting out a blouse at the other end. And Dad was eating his supper in front of the television, and little Pete was playing with his toy cars, and Harvey and Murdoch were flopping about on the sofa. It seemed as though the room was so full it would burst. "We must have more space," moaned Mum. "We could move to a bigger house," said Dad. "If only big houses weren't so expensive." All of the family said that they couldn't possibly move to a new house. They loved Trotter Street far too much. Then Dad had a good idea. "We could build an extension," he cried. Harvey wanted to know what an extension was, and Dad explained that it was an extra room at the back, just like the one Mr. Lowell had built next door. Mr. Lowell's extension was full of beautiful pot plants and ornaments. All the Pattersons thought that to have an extension like Mr. Lowell's would be a very good idea. So Dad brought home some brochures showing pictures of splendid extensions with happy people looking out of them. "I'll put it up myself," said Dad. "Are you sure you can manage it?" Mum said anxiously. Dad said that Mr. Lowell and his son Rajit and Frankie and May's dad from up the street had promised to help him, so it would be all right. Next week, a delivery van drew up outside the Pattersons, and some men unloaded bits of wood and windows and doors and stacked them up in the back garden. This was the extension, all in pieces. "Now we need some bricks," said Dad. A few days later, another truck arrived. It had Jiffy Building Company written on it, and underneath it said Joe and Jimmy Best. "Loads of bricks you've ordered," said Jolly Joe Best, jumping down from the cab. "Oh, load of bricks you've ordered," said Joe Jolly Best, jumping down from the cab. Then he and Jimmy lowered the flap at the back of the truck and began unloading the bricks. They took them through the house and stacked them in the garden. And after they'd driven off, Harvey, Josie and little Pete had a great time playing on the bricks, while Mum vacuumed away all the dirty footprints left by Joe and Jimmy. The following day, Dad got up very early and put on his old trousers, saying that he was going to dig out the foundation. Of course, Harvey wanted to know what a foundation was, and Dad explained that it was the solid base for the extension walls to stand on. Mr. Lowell came round after breakfast and helped Dad measure the space for the extension. They marked it out carefully with string and pegged it to the ground. Then Dad, Mr. Lowell, Rajit and Frankie and May's dad began to dig a trench, following the line of the string. Little Pete thought this was all very interesting, and he fetched his spade, and began to dig too, and so did Murdoch the dog. When the trench was finished, the men cleared the space where the floor was to be and put down bits of brick and rubble and covered them with a plastic sheet. Now everything was ready for the concrete, but first an inspector came to make sure everything had been done properly. Meanwhile, Josie and Harvey pretended that the extension was already built and they were having lunch inside. Josie imagined that it had pink wallpaper, and Harvey imagined that there were big curtains with patterns of aeroplanes. Dad was so tired the next day that he didn't get up early. Mum took him a cup of tea in bed. While the rest of the family were having breakfast, they heard a great noise in the street. They all hurried outside. A lorry had arrived at their house. It was huge. It had a big drum that turned slowly round and round. Cruck, cruck, cruck. On the side of the lorry was written Jiffy Ready Mix Concrete Company. Out jumped Jolly Joe Best. "Load of concrete you ordered?" he called cheerfully. "Not this morning, surely," said Mum. "I'm sure we didn't." But it was too late. Jimmy had already pulled a lever and the big drum poured a load of concrete all in a rush. Slop, slurp, dollop, splosh, just like that. It landed in a shivering heap right outside the Pattersons' front door. Uh-oh. Dad rushed downstairs, pulling on his trousers over his pyjamas. "We weren't expecting you today," he shouted. "That's okay, just sign here," said Joe, and he leapt back into his seat. "It's quick setting," he called from the cab window. "Be hard as a rock in a couple of hours. Better get busy." "But we haven't," Dad called back. But Jimmy was already revving up the engine. The big concrete lorry roared away up the street in a cloud of dust. There it goes. "Quick!" cried Dad, picking up a shovel. "Quick!" shrieked Mum, searching for a spade. "Grab those buckets! Fetch the wheelbarrow! Run for the neighbours! The quick setting concrete is going to set." Never had the Pattersons moved so fast. Mum began to shovel up the concrete into the wheelbarrow and trundle it through the house, while Dad shovelled and smoothed it down over the foundation and the brick. Joe and Harvey ran to fetch Mr. Lal and Rajit from next door, and Frankie and May's dad from up the street, and they all came running. The neighbours pitched in and shovelled and spread too. Josie, Harvey and little Pete ran up and down with buckets, and Murdoch joined in, barking loudly. Everyone laboured and struggled and fell over one another's feet. They shovelled and heaved and trundled concrete from the front of the house to the back, and steadily the heap on the pavement grew smaller and smaller. "It's beginning to set," shouted Mum. Everybody worked faster and faster. "Done at last," gasped Dad, throwing down his shovel and wiping his hands on his trousers. Then all the workers rested. The foundation was finished. Only a small hill of concrete was left beside the front door. It set so hard that nothing in the world would shift it. The extension went up bit by bit. First a low brick wall, then the roof, windows and door. And at last the Patterson family were able to move in. They were so pleased with their beautiful new extension that they gave a party for all their neighbours. Harvey and little Pete were extra pleased with the small concrete hill which stood outside their front door. None of their friends had one like it. It was great for sitting on and racing toy cars down, and if you climbed up and stood on the top, you could see right to the end of Trotter Street. There's the big concrete lorry. I hope you liked that one. It was a long one. Bye-bye.